Any questions from last time or just any questions in general before I launch myself? And get up at any time to get more food, coffee, whatever you need. Just don't be shy. Yes?
Can you explain the food?
I can. So the little crackers are, they're called crack. They're called crack because they've got a bunch of butter in them. And they and they traveled from Turkey down through the Middle East. The dip is called muhammada. It's very common. It's roasted eggplant or roasted red peppers and walnuts and pomegranate vinegar. And I can eat it by the spoonful. And then the little buns are just a treat that I learned how to make. I mean, they're in the cookbook Palestine, but I learned to make them from my friend's sister. And it's sesame seeds and more butter.
They're all wonderful.
Thank you. Everything is better with butter.
You can't go wrong with butter.
No, butter and olive oil, you know? So yeah, like I said, just get up and help yourself. So today we're going to try to get from World War I to 1967. If I'm going too fast or not fast enough, let me know. And at any point, any questions, just as I say every time, raise your hand or just yell at me because my students do that anyway. So let's have a map. So this is what Europe looked like on the eve of World War I. And this is important because it's all going to look profoundly different after. Especially Turkey, right? The Ottoman Empire is going to collapse and set into motion a lot of the things that will happen subsequently. So the Ottoman Empire entered World War I on the side of Germany. They thought that this was going to save them. Help them keep the empire together. Wrong. That is not what happened at all. And you see in this a rise of Arab nationalism as they watch the Ottoman Empire collapse. As one of my favorite comedians likes to say, like a flan in a cupboard. They saw this as hopeful. This was very hopeful. The British, well, their real interest was Egypt because of the Suez Canal, and Russia was looking to regain the Caucasus Mountain region. So everybody had something to gain from the collapse of the empire. Do I need to not paste? It's okay. So everybody had something to gain. Had something to gain from the collapsing Ottoman Empire. Britain also wanted to counter the alliance between the Turks and Germany. So, in true sort of British fashion, I guess we should say, they made some really interesting decisions, none of which they shared with the other parties involved. So just keep that in mind. And one of the ways that the British thought they could counter the Turks and Germany was to make an alliance with Arab leaders in the Hijaz. Hijaz is simply the desert. It's not really called that much anymore, but it's that Saudi desert. And especially the Sharif Hussein of Mecca. Sharif Hussein of Mecca was the guardian of the two holy cities of Mecca and Medina. So the two of the three holiest sites in Islam. The third one is where? Jerusalem. That's right. The third one is in Jerusalem. It's the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And he earned the name Sharif because he can trace his lineage back to the Prophet Muhammad. Not bad. So they thought, and there he is. He looks fantastic. And so this is kind of what everybody wanted. So Britain wanted this alliance. France wasn't 100% sure. They just wanted to keep up with everybody else. Everyone else had colonies. You know, the French was like, oh, okay. And they also claimed that they were the protector of the Maronite Christian community in Lebanon. So the majority of Lebanese are Maronite Christians. Okay, that is not Lebanon at the top. That's Morocco. And if you see right there at the top on the pillar, I just have to tell you that right? This is the Roman ruins at Volubilis, just outside of Meknes, on the way to Marrakesh. That's a stork. These giant storks build their nests on the top of these ancient columns, and nobody can make them go away, so they've just become part of the architecture. Right? They have said, this is home, we have generations living here, we're good. We like the Romans too. So what this sets in motion for the British is a series of correspondences between this guy here, Sir Henry Lord McMahon, I think, and the Sharif of Mecca, Sharif Hussein of Mecca. What the Sharif wanted was an independent Arab nation. He wanted independence for the Arabs. And he saw this as a possibility, again, with the Ottoman Empire collapsing. The British, once again, just wanted to make sure that they could hang on to the Suez Canal in the wake, again, of this empire, the Ottoman Empire, collapsing. And so what happens in 1915 and 1916 are a series of letters between these two that no one else really knows about except the British and the Sharif of Mecca and his close confidants. That should be a tip-off right there. That's a bad idea. Potentially bad idea. So there's these letters kind of going back and forth, and I want to tell you this is what they wanted. The British promised that in exchange for support against the Ottoman Empire, it would provide the Sharif of Mecca with the resources to declare an independent Arabian Peninsula, as well as most of the Fertile Crescent, including Jerusalem. Or at least this is, right? Because, the British have something to gain here. And in this correspondence, the Arabs claim that Britain promised them, again, Jerusalem as the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, that's fine, except that simultaneously, oh, there we are. Wait a minute. There we are. Simultaneously, there's another secret agreement going on. And it's the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And this is between Britain and France, and they didn't bother to tell the Sharif of Mecca about it. Like, nobody invited the Sharif to that party. And in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, it goes as follows. Direct French rule over much of northern and western Syria, and a sphere of influence in Damascus, Aleppo, and Mosul. Mosul is actually Iraq. What does Mosul have a lot of? Oil. It has a ton of oil. So that's pretty important to know. Okay. Britain would rule lower Iraq and advise an Arab government on the lands between the Egyptian border and eastern Arabia. And that the enclave around Jaffa and Jerusalem, a very large Christian community in Jaffa, it's like a 10-minute walk from Tel Aviv, would come under international rule. The problem with Sykes-Picot, besides the parties that were left out, was that all the Arabs got, all that the Sharif of Mecca got, was the Arabian desert.
So Jeannette, who
Yes.
who did this agreement?
The British and the French,
So they
and a
had
little bit of Russia.
two simultaneously
Secret agreement.
under the cover agreements going on
Correct.
at the same time.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Well, yeah, okay, right? Yes. Secret and going on simultaneously. So the British are just promising everybody everything,
All right.
whatever they want. There is a third situation also going on that nobody knows about, except the British. And that's the Balfour Declaration. Seriously, people, it's written on, like, it could be a napkin. This is the whole thing right here. And it is a letter from Lord Balfour to Lord Rothschild to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine. And here are the main points. Oh, wait, let's have some. The British government would set up a national home in Palestine for the Jewish community, that ostensibly the rights and status of the non-Jewish communities would not change. Right? So whoever's living there already, their rights and status are not going to change. But it is going to create this national home, which, okay, so now we have how many agreements? Three agreements that only maybe the British and maybe the French know about at all. The United States, we're still wondering how to find World War I. There were, needless to say, some objections. If you've been to Bethlehem and you've seen the separation wall, you see some of these are Banksy. The graffiti is all over the wall on the Bethlehem side, certainly not on the Israeli side. So the Arabs were 9/10 of the population. And let's remember, Arab does not mean just Muslim. Jewish Arabs, Muslim Arabs, Christian Arabs. 9/10 of the population were people who considered themselves Arab, including Jews. That it created a home for a group in a land that was already inhabited by somebody else. That's a problem. A big problem. And nobody bothered to ask the 9/10 of the population that lives there. So what do you think? They might have had a different answer. And ultimately, in the final settlement of the Balfour Declaration, there was no mention of the political rights of non-Jewish Palestinians. How many years now? Think to today. If you count back, how many years to 1917? Count it backwards. Oh, this is fantastic. Okay, so if you go, when we can all go again, there is an old, it's 1918, 1920 era railroad track between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And you can take the train, and it kind of lumbers its way along, and you go back and forth. I love to take the train from, either Tel Aviv to Jerusalem or Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, and it kind of winds its way around territory that you can't see on any of the roads or anything. So, highly recommend it. It's super cheap. Hang out with the locals. They're taking the train. It's fabulous. And then you don't have to drive and all that craziness. So, the Ottoman Empire is gone. The Arabs believe, we're going to get the independence promised to us in the Hussein McMahon correspondence. Britain and France are like, maybe not. We're going to, as the victors, we're going to dictate the terms of the peace. And in the making of these decisions, the defeated powers, and of course Russia, because now they're having a revolution, were excluded from these conversations. But, Russia had a serious interest in this part of the world. So no one could come to a conclusion about what are we going to do about three agreements that only certain people know about. How are we going to deal with this? So, since no one could reconcile this, the United States sends the King Crane Commission. So now we have like a fourth group in there. And this is so interesting. Here is what the King Crane Commission found. They found that nobody really wanted a change in status. Okay, yeah. The local people wanted complete independence. If they had to accept foreigners being there, they chose the Americans or the British, but anyone but the French. Anybody but the French. We just don't want the French, which is kind of really sad. And one of the other findings that will turn out to be really controversial is a limit on immigration until we figure out until the situation is figured out, right? So they're going to put a limit on Jewish immigration. And that was probably the least popular of all of those, but there you are. Did anybody listen to them? The answer to that would be, then again, a huge resounding no. No, just no. Nice try. Good, great. No, here's what happened instead. In 1920, at the Conference of San Remo in Italy, this is what the British, the French, other, various and sundry others, mostly the British and the French, decided the Middle East of the old Ottoman Empire, this is how it's going to look. And they're going to be under mandatories or leadership from which you can ostensibly graduate, responsible to the UN. Sort of. So what you get in 1920 is 4 mandates and an emirate. And can everybody see the map here? This is what it looked like in 1920. No, well, okay, so in 1932, Saudi Arabia does become independent. But in this critical area, there is no local leadership. They're under the guidance and the rule of the British or the French. Any questions about that? This is not the recipe for goodwill and better friendships. Let's just say that. So what happens, unfortunately, oh my gosh, there they are. This is the second group that I took to the Middle East. There are 3 of the women that went with us. That's the Jordan River. My students were so excited. We're going to all get baptized in the Jordan. I'm like, oh no, we're not. There will be no baptisms in the Jordan because it's filthy. It is really dirty. And you can see it there, the water, it hadn't rained in a while. And it's like, no, you may not be baptized no. God, well, they're doing it. Great. We saw some other people there doing it. They had brought a priest and like, no, I don't care. We're not doing that. So they put their little toes in, like, because students will find a way. So in this sort of soup, there is a lot of resentment. And so what happens in the interwar years between 1918 and when the Nazis invade Poland in 1939, I believe it was September of 1939, there are growing, increasing resentments. Nobody likes the mandate system. Egypt wants independence. Egypt is a whole other story. And certainly Iraq wanted independence as well. They believe also that they were promised independence. And here's what's happening in Palestine in the interwar years. In 1929, the Jewish Agency was established to manage affairs of the community, the Jewish community. And it included, actually 3 sort of competing military forces. The Haganah, which became the IDF today, the Irgun, and the Stern Gang, of which the Stern Gang was kind of more your IRA type, right? Guerrilla warfare, and they just don't, little more propensity for violence, I guess I should say. And that what happened, that in Palestine there is this growing perception that there is no Palestine. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. They never existed. And the land is empty. A land without people for people without a land. No one's there. 9/10 of the people are living there, but no one's there. So it's this imagined idea of an empty space, which is really interesting because they're not taking into account the Arab Jewish community that already, hello, we live here. So here's what happens. Oh, there they are. There we are doing one of our very favorite things ever, eating. I know. What? I'm just saying. Okay. Little quick detour to the United States. The United States, in this time period, was starting to realize that it might have a role to play. And they adopt a proclamation to make a Jewish state in Palestine. And it is endorsed by the World Zionist Organization. And yet, nobody seems to be paying attention to the mounting tensions. The UN says, maybe we need to postpone anything that we do for 10 years. That did not go well. And in 1949, in a grand act of cowardice, I'm sorry. In a grand act of cowardice, in 1947, at the end of World War II, Britain goes to the UN General Assembly, and here's what they, I just went backwards. Whoops. Come on, man. They said they could not keep control of the region. They could not handle their mandatory responsibilities. Too much chaos, too much violence, everybody hates us, shocker, and we're out. And they did. They picked up in 1947 and left. They took their toys and went home. They left Jerusalem, they left the environs, everything. Gone. And they handed over responsibility to the United Nations. The UN probably was ill-prepared to deal with this. But they did pass Resolution 181. This is so important to understand. Called for the partition of Palestine into an Arab state and a Jewish state. A state for the Arabs and a state for the Jews. Of which the majority they were envisioning immigrating post-Holocaust European Jews, which you can understand, right? And that Bethlehem and Jerusalem would remain under international control. Nobody gets Jerusalem, nobody gets Bethlehem, because it's sacred to everybody. Two states and a Vatican-like thing, but not controlled by the Pope. Right? That was UN Resolution 181 in December of 1947. It was accepted by the Zionist community, but not by the Palestinians. Because the Palestinians believed that they were going to lose, and because, here we go, that the plan gave the Jewish state 55% of historic Palestine. Yes.
So
Curtis.
it's like the movie The Matrix because of the Zion.
Oh, I don't know. That's a pop culture reference,
You
Curtis,
think?
that I don't think I have.
It refers to Judaism.
Great question, though.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love questions. Yeah, so it gave the Jewish state 55% of the land, even though 9/10 of the population was Arab. It gave the Palestinian population 44% 45% of which most of the land was not fertile. Now, there is, I mean, you know, to be fair, why would the UN make that kind of a decision? I've been doing a lot of yakking. Let's hear from all of you. Why would the UN do that in the wake of World War II?
They felt bad for the Jews.
Well, yeah, rightly so, right? 6 million Jews are dead, 5 million others, right? How do you cope with that, right? How do you even deal with that? So this was, or it seemed to be at the time, the answer. The problem is that they let a very justified and rightful concern disenfranchise a lot of people that are now very, very, very unhappy. See what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And it got spun in some circles by, you just can't keep the Palestinians happy. They rejected it. You can't keep them happy.
What circles?
It's mostly Zionist circles in the United States. Not necessarily Jewish circles, Zionist circles, of which they're quite different. Yeah. Oh, well, okay, so here's my group in Petra, because, you know, there they are. Take our picture with it. And here when we were staying near in Petra, we had a cooking class one night. So not only do we like to eat, we like to learn how to cook. So we had this cooking class, and those are our teachers. It was really fun. We have 2 cooking classes in my study abroad in Morocco this winter. So May of 1948, Palestine was eliminated. The state of Israel was created in its place, but what was not created with it? A state for the Palestinians. That's correct. And May 1st, May 1st is considered Israel. That's their Independence Day. It's their July 4th. In Palestine, for Palestinians, it's called the Nakba, which in Arabic means catastrophe. This catastrophe that befell us. And people got up and they moved. That led to a mass exodus out of Palestinian, mostly Muslims and some Christians. The other problem is that upon getting independence, Israel promptly, they were supposed to have their capital in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was supposed to be the capital of the new state of Israel. Moved the Knesset, which is the equivalent of the parliament, to Jerusalem. In essence, saying Jerusalem is the capital of our country. In defiance of, it's sacred to all 3 faiths and nobody gets to have it. Bad choice. Now, in response to this, 5 Arab armies on the 15th of May, 2 weeks later, crossed into, or crossed Israeli borders in military action, which I'm certainly not justifying that either. Another, I think, yeah. In 1949, all the parties, it's an armistice, it's not a peace. Jordan got sections of Jerusalem and the West Bank to administer, not part of their national territory. Egypt was allowed to keep the Gaza Strip and the Sinai, and everything else was under Jewish leadership. This is important. These boundaries are important. They're really important.
When there is
Yes.
like a border crossing,
Uh-huh.
is it like they're coming in and killing people, or they're just not allowed to be on that land?
Both. It's both. It's both. This is Mother Mary. It's at the it's at the Church of the Holy Family in Cairo, in El Fustat, in Old Cairo. I know, doesn't she look great? She still looks really white, but it's a great image. So there are rising tensions. The Palestinians are basically refugees in the West Bank and Gaza and other parts of the Arab world. Egypt starts to come to prominence, and the only reason I mention Egypt today is that when we get to 1973 and the last of this little journey that we're on at the moment, Egypt under Anwar Sadat is going to become a flashpoint, I think a really important moment for peace. A lost moment for peace, because of course he's assassinated in 1981 for trying to get on. But just so, Egypt at this point sees itself as the champion of the Palestinians. So the Egypt of Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, sees himself as the champion of the Palestinian people. So, and, he has since nationalized the Suez Canal, which of course put him on the wrong side of who? The British. So he nationalized the Suez Canal, which put him on the wrong side of the British, and that's kind of a little circus. And because of the rising tension, because of this situation with refugees, etc., in 1956, Israel grabs or makes an incursion into the Sinai. And the Sinai is that buffer space between Gaza and Egypt, right? It's that, I'll show you a map in a minute. It's that piece here. What's interesting about the Sinai is there's some very important things in the Sinai, like a monastery that has been a monastery, nuns, but it's nuns, St. Catherine's, that has been there since the 3rd century of Christianity. You can still go there. The nannies are kind of cloistered, but you can visit them. Yeah.
I'm confused when you say that the Palestinians left. What area was it that they left from?
Everywhere. They basically, everything that is, like, if you think of cities, think of Haifa, Jerusalem, and then a lot of the smaller cities. They went into the West Bank that is now being administered by Jordan, right? And they also became refugees so a whole big chunk went to Jordan. So Jordan has, I think today, a Palestinian refugee or, descendants of refugees of somewhere around 2 or 3 million. Right? So a lot of them went to Jordan because it was close. Some went to Egypt, some went to the, what are today the Emirates. Some came to the United States, some went to Europe. But a huge chunk, some went to Syria, some went into Lebanon. But they left their homes. And they left their homes abandoned, which is the topic of the lemon tree, right? For any of you who've read the lemon tree and about the house,
That was beautiful.
isn't that a beautiful book? Yeah, my students love it. Yeah, Curtis.
How does this tie into the current situation in the Middle East?
You know what? You're gonna have to come back next month.
Yeah.
Because, you know what it does, Curtis? This creates the situation that's going on right now. The events of today, of what we're talking about today, created what happened on the 6th of October last year. This is the origin, or the roots of what happened. So you can see they've been battling it out for quite some time. And so in 1956, Israel strikes into the Sinai. That again, what else? What else is in the Sinai? Important mountain. Mount. Yes, Mount Sinai. What happened on Mount Sinai? The 10 Commandments. Moses, the 10 Commandments. Didn't we say last night he might have been on something? Right? For all of you here, right? The professor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, the ancient Hebrews ostensibly used a peyote-like substance to achieve a greater communion with God, with Hashem, with Yahweh. Benny Shannon posits that that's how Moses saw the bush that was burning but not being consumed, is that he had ingested some of this to achieve that spiritual experience. This man is no joke. I mean, like, he is well published. He's a rock star in his field. Somebody asked him, how do you know? Oh, I've tried it. Good job. Okay, good for you. That's awesome. Research, right? Research. I do my research. I've tried peyote in the desert southwest of the United States. We're like, okay, we understand. This is Yasser Arafat. This is my favorite picture of Yasser Arafat ever. Look at this guy. I mean, if that's not cool and this was Yasser Arafat when he was, have been cool. Anyway, so by 1966, everybody is on a collision course. The PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which whose political organization includes what is today Al-Fatah, led by Mahmoud Abbas, they get the support of the Arab League, and there are, in response to the kind of the Stern Gang and their more guerrilla tactics, the Palestinians have the Fedayeen, and Fedayeen really means peasant, but they are armed commandos, also doing kind of guerrilla warfare. So everybody is on high alert. That's Moshe Dayan. We always know who he is because of the eye patch. So the immediate causes are sympathy for the PLO, tension between Israel and Syria over water. Israel and Syria are duking it out over water resources. Because as you're going to see in, I think it's the next slide or the slide after, the Golan Heights, which at this time is still part of Syria, is very fertile. Some of the best apples I have ever had come from the Golan Heights. In addition, the Israeli Prime Minister, Levi Eshkol, is seen as weak. He is seen as not doing anything to put down these tensions. He's not seen as doing anything to keep Israel safe and to stop all of the mounting sort of tension and violence. So what happens on the 4th of June in 1967 is that the Israeli cabinet votes for war, and they put it under the leadership of Moshe Dayan. This guy here. A hero of 1948. Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Who are they declaring war against? Because
They're declaring war against their neighbors.
Okay.
So
all of their neighbors.
their immediate neighbors. So Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon. Thank you. They decide we're just going to wipe it. We're just going to put a stop to this. We're going to wipe everybody out. Not a good decision, probably. Oh, there it is. There's the Golan. There's a huge Druze community in the Golan Heights. They're a sect or an offshoot of Shiism. They're very secretive in terms of religion, but if you go to the Golan Heights, they're some of the most hospitable people ever. They're delightful, and they're happy to kind of talk to you about their life. This is what happened in 1967. 6 days of war. An aerial assault on Egypt. In June, they grabbed the Sinai. Same day, June 7th, the Jordanian West Bank and the Golan Heights, which is now occupied Syria. So they made a massive grab. So today when we talk about, or you hear on the news, hopefully we'll get back to hearing it on the news, a withdrawal to the 67 borders, this is what they're talking about. A Palestinian state based on the land that was, a giving back of the land that was taken in 1967. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Did they come up with a reason for them to be able to do that? Was there something that they were in their own minds saying that we have to do this for
Defense.
defense? Okay.
Right. We have to do this for defense. They were discouraged by the United States, by Europe. There were a lot of people discouraging this kind of behavior, thinking that, as is rightly so, this can't lead to anything good. But Israel claimed that it was for their defense. Keeping in mind that they were the superior fighting force anyway. Do you see what I'm saying?
At the end of this speech, could you like summarize it a little bit?
I can try, Grace.
I watch the video too.
Yeah.
This is the summary, I know.
Yeah.
So what happens in June 8th, there is a UN-sponsored ceasefire. Everybody's like, okay, we're going to stop fighting. But none of the land got returned. So the fighting stopped, but Israel now had a new set of borders. A much expanded set of borders, and it became seen as an occupying power with millions of Arabs underneath it. Here's the map. Let's spend some time, perhaps, with the map. So this is what was Palestine under the Ottoman Empire, latter part of the 19th century to, 1946. Due to immigration, you start to see little pockets of Jewish immigration. Now, let me go back and say this again. I really want to reinforce this. Jews, Christians, and Muslims were all living here. So when we talk about immigration, we're talking about European Jewish immigration. Because the people that live there are not immigrating. Like, they've lived there since, Moses or before. And they're getting along about as well as, people get along. Right? 1946, right? 1947. This one right here is the UN partition plan. With Jerusalem and Bethlehem as cities set apart, and Ramallah as the capital of a Palestinian state.
Now, where is Ramallah on that map?
Ramallah is right here. Ramallah is right here.
Oh, okay.
So the way it was supposed to go, Tel Aviv, capital of the Jewish state, in 1948, Ramallah, the capital of the Palestinian state.
Okay.
And the Palestinian Authority, the PA, is still based in Ramallah. Big government building, they're all there, doing whatever they do. Yeah, pardon?
Was the Palestinian state supposed to include Gaza from the beginning?
Yes, it was always supposed to include
And they
Gaza.
always had this separation?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Originally,
I'm looking at the third map. From the
yeah,
left,
as part of the partition, see, look at the third map here. As part of the original partition plan, they were connected.
Okay,
It's hard to see there, but Gaza was connected to the West Bank.
it was?
Yes,
Okay.
it was.
I couldn't see it from here.
Yeah. Yeah, Gaza was connected to the West Bank. And what happened between 1948 and 1949 with the creation of the State of Israel, the Palestinians in Gaza were in essence cut off from the Palestinians in the West Bank. Families, parents, getting there as a circus. 1956, and 1967, a greater mass of land, and this is 2012. And when we get to next time, I'll show you another map, which it's even more grim.
Okay,
Yes,
I'm not getting it. The very first map,
yes,
everyone lived there together.
correct.
So why, when some Jews moved in, the second map, and all the other consequence maps, why can't it still be yellow?
Well, because they're European Jews that are escaping the pogroms in Eastern Europe. They're escaping the anti-Jewish sentiment of Europe.
And going to the first map doesn't work when there's already Jews there that didn't have to escape, but they're still Jews.
Right. But they were different. They practiced a little bit differently. They looked different. They were not as well educated. They were farmers and peasants, and they were and the remaining Jewish Palestinians that stayed, they faced massive discrimination for a really, really, really long time at the hands of the European population. And I have been told that by Palestinian Jews, said my grandparents faced a lot of discrimination because we're not European.
Well, and then outside nations got involved and started tinkering with
Yes.
the borders and, creating a Jewish state, and maybe if they hadn't, it might have worked itself out. I don't know, who knows, but they got in and started playing with the boundaries and saying, we're going to create a Jewish state as opposed to just,
Work it out.
kind of thing. And so that's why you end up, and then of course the Israelis, the Jewish people, they start to feel, because they're surrounded by Arabs.
Yeah,
Iran is.
Iran, they're not
Persian.
Arab.
They're Persian.
They're Persian. They're Indo-Europeans. Yeah.
And, but they're surrounded by Arabs that they view as an enemy, and so they, of course, are going to do what they can to protect the state that was created for them.
And again, it's not I would argue, it's what you just said. I would argue that the fault was made by not saying everybody's got to figure out how to share this,
Yeah.
right? And a really good friend of a friend of mine wrote a book called Sharing the Land of Canaan, and he makes the argument for the only true solution is for us to learn how to share it because it's sacred to everybody, it's important to everybody. The land is in our blood and our bones, and we have got to figure out a way to make this work. And we didn't because the Europeans, right? And I want to take a quick detour for just 1 second. In the midst of another really important event happened in 1956. In 1956, the United States, the CIA and James Bond, MI5, overthrew the democratically elected president of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, because he wasn't favorable to the West and he nationalized his oil fields. So the United States went in and ousted him and brought back the Shah. The rest of the region is seeing this. Do you see, does that? Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say there's a lot going on. This is like who's who in the zoo. As a colleague of mine at the Mossad likes to say. Who's who in the zoo, Jeannette? Like, I don't know. We're overthrowing governments in Iran in 1956. Can you imagine? Yes.
When did the U.S. begin start being a part of this?
Between 1948 and 1956. We are latecomers to the party.
Because of the boats and stuff? And
Because of all of this and the Europeans, and we didn't think we had an interest in the region in the beginning.
And the overthrow.
Pardon? And we were too busy overthrowing the government of Iran. Yes, I'm serious. And we wonder, and then we get to then we get to 1978 and we wonder why there were hostages. Okay, sorry. Oh, hang on. There. So this is where we are in the aftermath of the 6-Day War. Israel has the Gaza Strip, the Sinai, the Golan Heights, and the West Bank. And it is also the start of a massive settler movement. So what happens is in the land, in this territory here, right, was grabbed in 67 and all the way up to now, settlements start being built all over. Israeli settlements start being built, backing up to, or actually going into Palestinian territory post-1967. they're illegal. They're not supposed to be doing this. There's supposed to be a buffer. But one of the things that happened was that Israel moved its civilians into these settlements right up against and into Palestinian territory, as well as built this monumental wall that it turns out this fence is really smart. Like if you get too close to it, it alerts. How do I know that? I might have gotten too close. And they drive up. What you doing? Just checking out your fence. Looks great. Looking good. Carry on. Get back, ma'am. Can I just take a picture of that? No. I have a picture of it somewhere. So that you start to get the settler movement as well. And for all that, whatever the rhetoric is of what happened on October 6th, those settlements that were attacked are there illegally. And I'm not saying what happened on the 6th was okay, because it was not okay. But they were also not there illegally. And they're slowly encroaching on the little bit of Palestinian territory that's left.
Oh.
There's a house in Bethlehem. Then I'll get to you, Curtis. There's a house in Bethlehem that, because of the way the wall is built, the security wall, the wall goes right through the house, and it divided the house in half.
Huh?
Yeah, I got a picture, got a great picture of it somewhere.
Does somebody live in the house?
Well, not anymore, but they did. They did, and they had to leave because they cut the house in half to build a wall.
They didn't tear it down. They just.
No, they did not tear it down. You can see it. It's standing there. 2 halves of a house. I'm telling you, it would make you cry if it didn't make you more sad. Yeah. So, and I do want to say that is, to Curtis's point earlier, that is a legacy of '67. Is all of these settlements that should not have been built. And they recruited, especially from Russia and Eastern Europe, recruited members of the Jewish community to occupy these settlements.
Now, the settlements are in the West Bank,
The settlements are butting up to the West Bank and Gaza.
and there are settlements in Gaza.
Yeah, there are settlements. Let me get my mouse. Okay, I'm apparently mouse challenged. So there are settlements here, all over here. If you see territory here, there's a settlement. Backed up to the yellow. There are settlements backed up to the yellow. And there's a huge conflict, and all of the water, even like water coming into Bethlehem everywhere, is controlled by Israel. And it's a huge problem. Like, so if we didn't get our water delivery on Monday, which water came on Monday, unhappy Jeannette, where's my shower? But so the Palestinians have huge tanks to collect rainwater, et cetera, on top of their houses. But the argument is that the settlements are using it to fill their swimming pools.
To what?
Fill their swimming pools.
Oh.
And so that it's kind of the Northern California, Southern California debate, right? Northern California water going to Southern California water to water golf courses and swimming pools. I don't know if that's true. Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned that they were building a wall and something about, like, that them being there illegally.
Yes.
I was just wondering what you thought about that and the current situation with Mexico and Donald Trump.
Oh my God, I don't want to win.
Yeah. We don't have time.
You know, I'm going to tell you this, Curtis. I think walls make poor neighbors. I do not think walls make good neighbors. I think that they're antagonistic. Now, if there's I just think walls are antagonistic, in my opinion. But you know, as I say every time I propose, I do not dispose. And I realize we're at time, but I am happy to answer any additional questions.
You
Yes,
know,
Jerry.
I don't see a difference between the 1940s map and the 1967. Is that because I'm not close enough?
Yeah, and also because the '67 map leaves out the other territories that were grabbed.
That's right. Well, that I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't see the Sinai and that type of thing.
Yeah, this is this is marginally smaller.
Okay.
This is marginally smaller.
All right. Now that you just said that, I can see it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Was that just too much?
Yeah,
Oh.
great stuff.
Yeah.
Flood of information.
When you talk about the settlements, like, do they just possess the land, or, I mean, they just,
Without
just-
war, they just
Without-
move
They just
in.
move in.
they just.
Do they?
They move in,
own
they build
property?
houses. Pardon?
Do individuals own property?
Yes. They take over the property and claim it as theirs if there's no one living on it, like there's no house on it. Or because a lot of the Palestinians abandoned their land
Ah,
in 48 and again in 67 when they became refugees, so they just build a house and say, oh, this is.
And this is just a thought that, well, when they're doing that, why can't it turn into the first map that where they're all getting?
Well, that's the argument of some people is that that to deal with the settlements is to now displace several million people, right? So what do? Are you going to just displace? I mean, where are they going to go, right? So now you're right. So now we get back to that's the argument of friends of mine. Now you get back to the first map. How are we going to share it? Because right now, to get to Jerusalem from Bethlehem, which it's 10 miles, If I take the bus, it's like 20 minutes, unless we get stopped at the checkpoint. But if we want to drive to Jerusalem, it takes like an hour and a half, because you can't drive. The Palestinians with a Palestinian license plate can't drive on a lot of the highways to get to Jerusalem. They have to go. It's this very circuitous route and 17 million checkpoints, and pretty soon it's like, I think I'll take the bus. Yeah.
this was a new thing to me about, the Jews that moved into the settlements being not from Israel.
Some of them are now, or they've had more generations of them, but initially, no, they were immigrants.
Ah,
Weren't some of them from Bulgaria?
Some were from Bulgaria, just like Dahlia in the lemon tree,
Yeah.
from Russia and Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Mhm. Which again, you can understand, they were being killed. I mean, it was awful. It just didn't, the problem was the real problem. The solution was the problem. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the solution that has become the problem. Yeah.
So if you ask the people there, the Jewish people there, how many different factions of Jews do you think they would say there are?
Oh God. There are, okay, so if you look at the makeup of the Knesset, there are so many political parties in Jerusalem that Labor and Likud are the two main parties, right? Bibi is Likud. Nobody can get a majority, because there are just so many small parties, all the way from Orthodox, we don't do anything but pray, to Jews that say we want map number 1, right? To people who say that there is a small group of Jews in Jerusalem that say that the entire creation of Israel was wrong. It's anti-Torah, it's anti-who we are, wrong. So I can't even tell you how many groups there are. But I can assure you of one thing. The majority of the people that I know on all sides of this, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, don't want what's going on right now. They want peace. They want their children to live in peace. My friends that are Jewish are tired of sending their sons and daughters off to serve in the military. I mean, they don't like living this way. But I propose that the leadership of both sides right now, they've been there too long. And they have too much anger and too much hatred to fix it. They need to step aside. It's time to take a big step and give it over to the next generation. Those people that were singing. Yeah.
are the Zionists one part?
Zionism is not Judaism. Well, I mean, Zionism is political Judaism.
Okay.
Most Jews are not Zionists.
Okay,
So, most Jews are not Zionists.
and Zionist philosophy is what?
Is from the river to the sea.
Okay.
We have all the land because it was given to us by God. I guess they checked in with God. I don't know. But, there's always difficulties when we speak for God. No matter, what of the three Abrahamic faiths you are, when you start speaking for God, it's tense. I think it makes God tense. But I wouldn't know. So yeah, it's political Zionism is the idea that we are the rightful owners of this land, and that it belongs to the Jewish people from the Mediterranean to the Iranian border. Now, they were not the original inhabitants, right? The ancient Hebrews, they were polytheists, crazy pagans running around worshiping Baal before they got there. Doing human sacrifice, I don't know, whatever the hell they were doing. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like they didn't sprout up and become bipedal there. But of course that was millennia ago. Yeah.